this episode, we're going to be getting into part 2 of this montage, where we're going to be looking at some of the biggest failures, successes, learnings, and challenges that we've heard from our guests this year so far, because we really want to unpack what it is that they've been through. So Luke takes some of the most awesome things that he's heard this year so far in terms of the challenges, the failures, the successes, the learnings that all these amazing entrepreneurs have been through, and I hope you enjoy them too. If you have some awesome things that you've heard on the podcast this year that haven't been shared in this episode, please drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to know more about what's really stood out from you, from our guests, and from our podcast this year. But that's it for the introduction. Let's get into this awesome montage that Luke has created for the last week of 2024. Welcome to The Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between.
We got to about 100 customers, and we found that we could no longer do the deliveries ourselves in our Ford Figo and Ford Fiesta, respectively. So we outsourced to different delivery companies. And as soon as we did that, and we tried this 3 or 4 times, with each delivery company, it would be good for the first week. And then after the first week of kind of hypercare, the number of clients that we had would start falling off. After the third iteration of this, we started to panic, because when you have 100 customers, if 10 leave, that's kind of a big big chunk of your customer base.
It's a big chunk.
At your point, at the point. So one smart thing that we did in retrospect was we talked to people who left, because we're small enough to be able to know who these people are. And we went to
because also the thing is, you were doing the deliveries yourself. I mean, it's like this was
exactly.
You were the customer interface. You were every role in the business at once.
Exactly.
As I'm sure everyone listening to this can understand and resonate with.
Exactly. So we went to one young couple who are really foundational in terms of how we got to where we got. And we said to them, kind of same questions as everybody else. Why is it that you left? And kind of fairly annoyed and semi-exasperated, they said, you're more expensive than Takealot, right? And we're like, oh crap, so you left because they're cheaper. And also we know we're more expensive than Takealot because they're kind of our supplier. So obviously we're more expensive than Takealot. So they said, why do you think it is that we've not bought from Takealot? And we were like, well, we did the classic thing where we were like, but in our brains we're going, wow, that was really stupid not to think that. And, see previous notes about being stupid 24, 25-year-olds. And we said, could you tell us? They said, the reason why we buy from you instead of from Takealot is because Takealot delivers at some point between 9 and 5. But you guys always delivered at the time that we asked you to, and you followed the instructions, because my baby is napping at the times when I don't want you to deliver. And if you delivered at those times, then you'll wake my baby up, and then I might as well have gone to the store anyway and gotten 80 decibels directly piped into my eardrum and had a wider selection of things to choose from and gotten everything I need, and then come back home. So what you're solving for...
They were paying you for peace and quiet.
Exactly. They're paying us to remove the anxiety from the delivery experience for them. And we thought that we were selling diapers, but we weren't. We were selling an anxiety-free experience. And that blew our minds and totally changed the way that we conceived of the business and how we were solving the problem for people.
When was it that you first started growing? Because what I want to understand is, if we talk about these scaling issues, the first thing for me is when you scale very quickly, maintaining quality and customer satisfaction and customer experience can be a serious challenge. So what was the first growth point that you experienced that you would say put your quality, delivery time, and customer satisfaction to the test?
Yeah. I think maybe even before we get to the scaling part, because I think for us, let me say, when we started doing groceries, it was very challenging as well, because there was no relationship. So what will happen is you, as a customer, you go into our app, you buy groceries, and then behind the scenes, we need to load someone with cash. They go into the store, they buy groceries, and we need to have cash for that, right? So in fact, we started experiencing a lot of challenges back then because cash flow became a real problem, right? So So moving from 100,000 to 200,000 was challenging. And often that will happen when someone is actually shopping. So you find that like a day is maybe we budget like 100,000 rand, and then the following day is 200,000 rand. But we have not closed the store, right? So all the pickers are in the store, and then now here's an order for 200,000 rand. And what I had to do, I'll be sitting on the phone calling all these people, my friends, trying to get that cash, right? At times, like now, you need to go and run and someone deposit money, and then you need to take it and deposit like physical cash so the guys can actually buy the things, you know. And sometimes, you'll see the guys posting the picker saying, you know what, the card is declining, you know. But it wasn't declining. For them, they were thinking it's declining because maybe they haven't transferred money into the card. But for my side, it was declining because there was no money, you know.
There's no money.
But the people who were working there, there's no money. But people who were working there, they were thinking like, no, like also like you have to, people need to understand that they work for a good company. You know, they can't be thinking this company is broke, you know. So there was a lot of that, right? So we were struggling a lot. I still remember like we got to a point where even we couldn't pay rent for like a good 6-8 months, you know. And at that time, I would get interviews, like you, 702. And I was hoping that, when you go to this radio interview, you're hoping that it's going to change things for good, you know. You go check the app, there isn't that much sales happening, you know. But then the only person who will listen to your interview is the landlord. You know, I still remember this other time after the interview, when I went back to the office, the landlord is sitting on the boardroom, you know, and is waiting for me, you know. And when I got there, he was like, "Yo, I saw you on the interview, right? That means you're doing so well. When
Sounds
I
like things are going quite great for you,
you know." Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and I had to tell him that, whatever you saw on the news was not meant for you, right? I can't go on the news and tell customers how we're struggling. You know, I have to keep a positive spirit, positive face. So the truth is we don't have money, but we'll pay you when we get there, you know? And that's the thing that really kept us going, right? So like really just one of the things that I learned in those days was like, when you have a problem, speak to people, tell them, right? So telling people that you've got a financial problem can give you that, because I mean, like we literally were funded by that as well, right? Where a landlord says, you know what, it's fine, you can keep going here, right? I trust you that whenever you get that money, you'll pay us. You look like you're a trustworthy person, you know. The same thing with the friends around me.
Because you didn't have a business model problem, and it wasn't your strategy that was an issue either. It was just a working capital issue, which is, I guess, the nature of the business model that you operate. But it's one of those things where it's like you can't, like the foreseeable future is not so foreseeable, as I like to say. So the point is like having that kind of cash reserves to unlock that is like that's not something that you have available to you. So it's and I think something like that makes it a lot easier to be able to ask for help, because I have no doubt in the business. It's just like it needs resources.
Yeah, no, definitely. Look, I mean, we needed resources, but also at the same time, I think there was also a lot of things that we're banking on, right? We're banking on like the whole model to work. We needed like partnerships from retailers, right? So we can get better margin as well. So it's more like we must start so that when the people see that this is working, they can then partner with you and get some margin as well, right? So there was a lot of faith in that to say, as we execute these things, one of these big retailers will come and say, you know what, I want to partner with you, right? So those were the things that we were dealing with, but we have to keep this thing going as well, right? So I think, but obviously what's also important as well is you don't want to invest time and money in things that are not going anywhere, right? So what was also clear to us is like, that was going to be the space, the next hot space, and we have to find ourselves in it, and I don't think we're wrong, so we were right. So all that investment that we put through, I think, I would say did, pay off.
So again, on that point is you're scaling quite quickly. I want to separate the cash flow problem and talk about the funding needed to be able to scale that, because that would have unlocked it as well. And there's a different sub story there that I'm just going to park for a sec. But I still really want to go to a point. So you're going from 100,000 to 200,000 a day. Obviously, the cash flow pressure is a big one, because like quite literally you can't deliver because you can't purchase. So how is it that, like, in terms of, I still want to go back to this point of maintaining the quality, the customer experience, delivery time, maintaining the value proposition, the promise that you're doing there. There's the point of the cash and just not being able to necessarily execute just because of the cash. But what other challenges that did you face as your demand was growing to try and keep up with satisfying all of the stakeholders that are on your platform?
Yeah. And I think, look, I mean, what was key then, even then, when we had these challenges of cash, we managed to deliver all these orders, right? So we're still trying to push for that 1 hour delivery.
That's awesome.
So that 1 hour delivery was still happening no matter what. So that means if you are busy shopping, I'm on the call, calling people, I'm getting money, I'm driving like a mad chicken, going to the ATM to put the cash, right? So that you get your groceries in 1 hour, right? There was just a lot happening in the background that, like as a customer, you would not even have imagined, And then what happened is after that, then I think our really turning point happened when some lady actually posted about us on Facebook, right? She posted, it was a closed group, I think 5,000 moms. It's called Jewish Jobbik moms, very wealthy, Jewish people in that group. Someone posted about us to say, these Zulzi guys are so good, right? I use them. They're so quick. They deliver things quickly. And then, other people then started commenting the same thing to say, I use them all the time. I don't use the traditional retailers anymore to buy my groceries. I use these guys to order stuff, and then it was at the back of that where we saw a huge spike on the business. I remember when I woke up the following day, we were used to doing let's say 100 orders a day, right? I woke up in the morning the following day, there was about 700 orders waiting for me to deal with them,
Sure.
And I still remember when I Googled, I was checking, is there anyone who wrote an article about us? What happened here? And now I'm sitting here, I have a problem of I don't have shoppers, I don't have drivers, I don't have money to do all of these things, right? So now I need to wake up and fix that problem, right?
So before you continue, I also just want to double click on the point there is that what those nothing can ever replace word of mouth and social proof as in terms of marketing. You can spend all you want in terms of marketing. You can do all the PR activities. You can get on 7202. You can get on the founder files. Don't get me wrong. It works and it helps. But that point around people that I already trust saying, hey, we use this and it's great. Nothing is going to unlock more customers than that, ever.
But I mean, I think on this topic around growth, so I would kind of think about it in two buckets. The one is how do you grow revenue? And the second one is how do you improve efficiency? And that second one is actually something that we've been thinking about a lot at Silvertree over the last 2 years. Because so I spoke a long time ago about this period of time where as a startup, you maybe stop having momentum. So your growth slows down for whatever reason. And that then changes the company culture significantly and changes what you need to do. So there's obviously the topic around how you maintain revenue growth, and maybe let's come back to that. But what do you do when revenue slows down? And this is generally going to happen in most businesses at some stage, right? In our particular case, it was post-COVID. So COVID came along. All of our businesses could continue to operate because they were essential services. And they were obviously online. And so we had a cracker of a 2020 from a commercial point of view, although it was very difficult personally and to actually keep operating. And up until that stage, e-commerce had only ever grown as a share of revenue in the world. E-commerce had only ever gone up. And so from that was this idea that all that it needs is for people to try e-commerce, and then they're going to stay as e-commerce customers. And so the entire e-commerce industry in the whole world were rubbing their hands to say, fantastic, we've had this leap forward 5 years into the future. We've acquired 5 years worth of customer growth. Fantastic. And so everybody, including us, hired new warehouses, hired new staff, blah, 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 right? Off we went. And then it turns out that for the first time in history, e-commerce's share of revenue as a share of retail went down. And it is now pretty much in much of the world on most of the kind of categories that did exist pre-COVID, roughly where it would have been had COVID not happened. So COVID was an up, and then it was a down, and then it's back to trend. And so we're on this underlying trend as e-commerce as a sort of market saturation in retail, as if COVID had never happened. But of course, we didn't get there through steady growth. We got there from over expansion and then having to cut costs. And so we needed to cut costs and focus a lot on efficiency. And that's when a lot of our topics around how we look for synergies across the portfolio companies became more urgent. Because in general, if you're growing fast, you can afford to be a little bit inefficient because you can afford it, and also because you can always invest a couple of months ahead of your capacity. So you can have a bit of slack so that as the additional demand comes in, you don't land up running short. All of a sudden, when you go through a downturn period, all of a sudden there's a lot of focus on cash and on cash flow and actual affordability. Plus, you need to start thinking again about if I can't drive the top line, how do I drive efficiencies further down the stack? And so we then worked a lot over the last few years at how do we cut inefficiency out of what we do. Luckily we're growing steadily again, and so that means that these days our efficiencies do not have to focus on can we cut people, which is incredibly painful, difficult process, dangerous process. It can instead be how do we grow our business faster than we grow our cost base. So our cost base can grow 10-15% and our revenue can grow 30-40%, right? And so the way that you do that is incredible attention to detail. It's essentially looking at what do we do that doesn't work well or that takes a lot of time, and then spending a lot of time with a lot of people working out why do we do it that way and how can we do it a different way. And in particular, even better, can we just not do it at all? Those are the most difficult and the most impactful things. Yeah. And so one example at Faithful to Nature, for example, which was a very difficult decision to make, but it was absolutely the right one. About 2 years ago, Faithful to Nature, its entire history, had where you could buy products that we didn't yet have in stock. So you buy the product, it was a back order, we'd send you a message to say, we'd warn you before you bought it. So the communication was very good. We'd tell you in advance, look, we don't have it right now. Your order's going to wait until it arrives. And then we'd communicate with you and say, look, this is what the supplier is saying. We should expect it in 7 days' time. We'll send it to you then. Do you want us to send the rest of your order now and we'll send the other product later? It was a really good customer experience.
So just a lot of customer communication.
A lot of customer communication, and it was a huge amount of effort. And so I did a very detailed analysis to actually see whether we made money off these. And the answer was no, because we spent so much time on negotiating with the supplier and with our customer to get the communication right, that it basically, and then plus additional courier costs, that it ate up all of the profit we made off these products. Plus, at the end of the day, it delivered a bad experience to the customer, even though the customer said they were willing to wait. So they didn't think that we were doing anything wrong. They were willing to wait, but nonetheless, they were waiting. So what it was doing was it was reminding customers that Faithful to Nature is something that you buy from if you need the product next week or the week after. Whereas we were competing with you going to the mall and buying your product right now. So we needed to get it right in customers' heads that they expected when you buy it on Faithful to Nature, I'm going to get it today or tomorrow. Always. Otherwise, you don't trust us and you're going to go to the mall when you run out of something. And so we stopped back orders. And that obviously cost us several % of revenue overnight. But it has meant that we have removed several departments, essentially, from the team over time.
So just to confirm, did you say 70% of revenue?
No.
7?
A few % of revenue. I don't remember the exact number.
A few percent,
not 70%.
Okay. I misheard you quickly. I was like, whoa.
No,
that is a hectic decision.
That would have been a very big decision. No, it was a few %. But still, when we were in a period of time when our revenue was not growing very rapidly, a few % is significant. But it was absolutely the right call, and our organization is way simpler, and our customer experience is way better. And so, so anyway, putting it back to the overall question is that as you grow, you need to be growing your company capabilities and your team capabilities and your team efficiencies such that your costs are growing slower than your revenue is growing. Otherwise, you don't ever get to profitability, and even if you're at profitability, you don't get to better profitability. And so that is a big piece of it, and a huge focus of my time on an ongoing basis, and that applies across everything. On the revenue growth side, I mean, like my takeaway is also there. A lot of it is attention to detail. It's just thinking about every single customer interaction that you can think of, prioritizing them by how often they happen, and improving them, and just continuing to do that. Listen, making sure that you're collecting customer feedback systematically, and so and improving it, and that applies across your marketing campaigns, your use of partnerships and of influencers and all these sorts of things, but also your word of mouth, obviously, as well.
Yeah. So a philosophy that we have in Metavolve just about the growth elements there is, again, I love the way that you explain that, because a lot of people are like, okay, how you grow is you grow revenue and you grow profit. And you're like, no, you grow revenue and you improve efficiency, which will lead to profit. Again, leading indicator versus the result. So, but what we do is that, again, it's the zoom out of the 15 to 20 year journey that we're busy talking about. I think specifically to our business model, where the time to results in terms of strategy is at least 18 months. So like that kind of thing is naturally, if you look at like the product life cycle of businesses being on average 6 years now, inherently with our business is just longer than that. Haven't calculated the actual number, I just know intuitively it's longer. Anyway, but when we're talking about the growth that we're wanting to achieve, and especially when you're zooming out in marathon level years, it's kind of like, instead of having this constant slope that you're trying to sprint on and like scrabble through, and you trip over and then fall back a bit and just keep going on this, like trying to achieve this linear or exponential growth, I prefer them like the analogy of a set of stairs, right? Essentially you where the point is like you grow, stabilize, grow, stabilize, grow, stabilize, or at sometimes you take 2 steps back to take 3 steps forward. And the point is, and the thing is, and what's incredibly important here is that's not happening in our operational environment, but that's happening at a tactical and a strategic level. Where it's sometimes where one of my favorite questions to ask myself is, what's preventing me from focusing 80% of my attention on growth, right? Either in terms of improving efficiencies or increasing revenue. Let's do all of those things right now this quarter, and then let's just create all of the focus to be able to do growth. Because then when we grow to that point, we're going to have new problems that we're going to have to figure out again there and do that. And it's almost this. It's turning into the cycle of, there's 3 months of stability, 9 months of growth. 3 months of stability, 9 months of growth each year. And so far it's working. I'll let you know if it stays like that for 50 to 20 years.
I really like that. I think that's exactly spot on. And I mean, I think this topic around having the right balance of experimentation versus optimization is also important. It's kind of it's another phrase in exactly what you're saying, is that I've seen some of our businesses which, as a result actually of their company culture that came from the founding team, and even after the founding team had left, they tended to be chaotic businesses. And so they would tend to always be launching something new and not spending time on efficiency. So what that landed up happening is that there were so many workarounds and experiments and these sorts of things that maybe half of team capacity was spent on just keeping the workarounds working. And so that was an example of a business where, in fact, you needed to like maybe slow down a little bit on the new product launches and focus a bit more on efficiency, so that you could then go back to launching new things more quickly again. But on the other hand, if you have the other extreme to that is to say, whenever we come up with an idea, we're going to do that idea perfectly on day one. We're going to work out all of the operational processes and the KPIs and the reports, etc. But I think there's a part of,
and you fail.
Well, exactly. Launch. You fail to launch, or even more, you launch and it doesn't work because you didn't test the market, right? And so you've spent a huge amount of resources on it. So I think, I mean, often when you're trying a new thing is to be very clear in your mind about, why are we doing it at this stage? Are we doing it because we want to make money off it? Or are we doing it because we are wanting to learn? And what you're wanting to learn is you're wanting to learn, can we deliver this thing? And more importantly, do customers want it? And then once you know that customers want it, then you go back and you say, okay, cool. Now we're going to build it properly. And I guess that's a little bit of your point around sort of take a step, stabilize. Taking a step is putting some ideas out there, seeing what sticks. And then when something sticks, then make sure you take the time to actually make it like efficient, so that you're not layering like Band-Aid on top of Band-Aid. I think that sort of almost rhythm of new initiative and improvement is a very useful thing to think about.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad we're onto something good. So Paul, like on the topic of growth now, right? We've been speaking about how others do it, how your portfolio companies, Silvertree. That's like, we've spoken a lot in the past. We've spoken stories. You've given so much wisdom, so many lessons. I think one of the key things to take out of this and to remember at the end of the day is that the early stage startup experience is very sexy because it's fun and experimenting and figuring things out and doing all that. But a lot of what we've spoken about is like, the reality is at the end of the day is you need to be a business. And there's a whole lot of things in business that are extremely engaging and exciting, but not very sexy, but they need to be done, right? And it's so important. And this is the reality. And I think there's so much wisdom to that for just expectation management, also focus in terms of making sure that you're doing something meaningful and sustainable and valuable. But to now change those gears, and let's go back to you as the co-founder, CEO of Silvertree Brands, where just right now, what would you say that the present and the near-term future looks like for you? What are your plans, if you're willing to share that, and how do you intend on maintaining your growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe to merge those two points you just made now into one point. There's this topic around how do you manage yourself? And I mean, everybody is different. And obviously I talk a little bit of some from my own experience, as well as, seeing colleagues, etc. And, you're right about the early stage of startups being super sexy. And then you get into the grind of running a bigger organization where you got to deal with, a key person resigned. Now I have to go and do a job interview process, or I have to deal with this person who's not doing their job. Do I need to fire them? How do I performance manage them? Those sorts of things are not considered so sexy. But I think one of the important things to do is to keep reflecting on why you decided to do what you are doing. And remind yourself, and it's quite helpful to write it down. To be honest, I haven't written it down as much as I should. So this is a case of do what I say, not what I do. But basically, like at the beginning of or early on any entrepreneurial journey, is to write down what success might look like, where you would like to be in 5 or 10 years' time, and why you're doing it. So that you can look on that and actually celebrate the parts that's working well. Because if we're having this conversation like we're having now, you've become the CEO of a successful business. That's amazing, right? There are very few people who do that. If you ask the average person off the street, including yourself of 10 years ago, would you like to be the CEO of a business employing X many people, feeding that many families, offering these amazing services, and you're the boss, right? 99% of people would say that's amazing, including you of 10 years ago. And
especially
so reminding yourself of that fact. Well, exactly, right? Reminding yourself of that is I think really important, not to gloat or to anything like that, but just to remember that you're actually where you want to be. And as you were saying about yourself personally, is that you wouldn't want to be doing anything else. And that's not necessarily true of everything that you need to do in your day, right? There's going to be parts that you enjoy less and there's parts that you enjoy more. But at the end of the day, you've made the decision to be where you are and you're enjoying that. And I think that's helpful. But of course, if you struggle to convince yourself of that, then you need to also then think about what that means. And that maybe it's time for a transition.
And I think just at the point, interjecting, I know you're about to make a point, but I just want to finish that point there, is that I think what's underestimated now is that a lot of people will visualize and envision or aspire to what they want their business to succeed. But what they don't realize is that once that's there, you are now a leader. And that comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot that I think is underestimated. And it's a lot of it's glorified. And I think rightly so, because good leaders, the world needs them. But at the end of the day is the fact that leadership is hard and leadership's difficult. And the point at the end of the day is that most of the things that nobody else wants to do often goes back to the leader who needs to do it in order to keep things going smoothly. And I think the underestimation of that is because when we talk about, it's my business is going to be the market leader in this. It's cool. You're going to be a leader of something that's leading in a market or an industry. That's a lot of responsibility. Are you ready for that? And are you able to go through the shifts in your own expectations and desires for how you want your day-to-day work life to look in order to be able to take on those responsibilities? And then also, to your point at the end of the day, is also maintain the gratitude, right? It's be grateful that this is what you wanted at the end of the day.
I want to pause here for a moment and talk about why it is that we created the podcast in the first place. The reason why I'm doing this is because in all the preparation sessions that I do with the guests before coming on the podcast, I obviously speak to them around the philosophy of the podcast, around the philosophy of Metavolve and why we're doing all this in the first place, because it helps provide the framework that allows the freedom for the conversation so they know what we're trying to get from the content. And I want to take a moment to just share this philosophy with you so you can understand just a bit more about us and what we do in the background. So the whole purpose of the Founder Files is to provide established entrepreneurs with practical stories and insights from people that have been there before so they can avoid years of trial and error in scaling their own businesses. Now, why is this philosophy important to us? Well, because this is a huge part of what we do at Metavolve. And if you're not aware of this, the Founder Files is owned by Metavolve, which is the company that I'm a co-founder of. And Metavolve's purpose is to accelerate the time it takes to build a great sustainable business. And our mission is to ensure that as many entrepreneurs as possible can take a holiday where they actually switch off whilst their business keeps growing. And our vision is imagine a world where just 10% more small to medium businesses were able to be sustainable without being dependent on the founders that started them. What would that do for the economy? What would that do for mental health? What would that do for being a present parent? What would that do for job creation, etc.? This is our little ripple effect we're trying to make the world a better place. So Metavolve and the Founder Files essentially come together as a collective mission towards removing the founder's trap, allowing entrepreneurs to build amazing businesses, but also enjoy the fruits of their labor. Do so with less stress, do so with more time off, and really being able to enjoy what it is that they've built, but at the same time, create a business that is exitable, whether or not they want to exit it, but also create the opportunity for them to focus on the innovation that they want to as they scale the business. And the means to the end of just doing that is, one, on this side, all the experience shares and learnings from other entrepreneurs. Is we know as founders, we love to learn from other founders. We love learning in general. So this is a big part of that mission in order to be able to share these practical insights that these people have to share. But part of that mission and the means to an end here simply is strategy. And that's what we do at Metavolve, is we do strategy, coaching, and facilitation. And the reason why is that how can we get all this thinking that you have on your business, because the strategy is already working if you're in the scale stage, and how do we simply download this into your team so that other people can take on responsibility and execute, and so you can do the hard thinking upfront so that you can actually switch off and allow yourself the freedom to be creative, or the freedom to really do what you want with your time. So that's what we do at Metavolve. That's why we do what we do at the Founder Files. And I just wanted to share that with you so that you know exactly what it is that we're doing this for and why it matters so much to us. And if any of this philosophy resonates with you, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are part of an accelerator, whether you are in corporate ESD, whether you are an investor, I would love to chat to you. I'd love to see how anyone can align with what we're doing. Because if we can make the world a better place together by building sustainable businesses with healthy entrepreneurs that can really enjoy what they do with their time and with their attention, then I think we would all benefit. So please, if you share in this philosophy too, then please reach out to me. Follow the link in our description to go to our website. Let's have a conversation and see what we can do to ensure that more entrepreneurs can actually take holidays where they switch off whilst their business keeps growing.
What were those tell me about those assumptions that you made and where reality almost kicked you in the teeth in terms of this is not the same customer segment.
So, well, I mean, it actually worked out positively, because if we'd conversely done it Joburg to Cape Town, there would have been a huge lesson. It's like everyone wants it in Cape Town, just like my Gold's Gym in Sandton. Everyone's like, you need to open this in Cape Town. No. Believe me, it wouldn't work the same. I know this for a fact. It's just is what it is. That lesson was in New York later that you're talking about for me, where you were like, we had the switch with like 70 to 80 people in the packed classes in Cape Town. Oh, we're doing 110 people in New York. We need huge spaces. No, not quite. It's someone said, build it and they will come. Build it, market the hell out of it, and they may come. There's a lot of, that was my lesson, is like, I thought we had such a strong brand, and I know it is a strong brand now, especially after the New York part of it, but bringing it to New York, and without wanting to jump too far ahead, it was a lot of lessons. You think you're going to open, we had all the merch, and we had all the Switch merch in New York, and after the first weekend, I said, how much did we sell? And someone said, none. Yeah. And the reason is no one knew what it was. No one wanted to advertise it. It wasn't cool yet. But we'll get to that later. The thing that I wanted to mention is, like, so we opened Morningside out of the gate. That was the best store we ever had. It was just the cash cow. It was printing money. It was out of control. And then we thought, people came to us and wanted to open, and we went the franchise route, which is something that I will never do again. I said it, but I did it with Switch for a while. But
you've told me that a couple of times. Sorry, Steve, but I really want to get into that. But I'm just conscious if we're going to go down another path of the story. But it's again just the fact that it's like we opened up and straight out the gate it was successful. I'm like, I want to know why. So obviously you made this educated guess, went out there, you said market the hell out of it. And you had these people coming in. I just want to understand a little bit about this journey and just some of the adaptations, right? So obviously it's like, obviously going in Cape Town, going to Joburg, and it's like it was more successful there. But there was naturally some adaptations, and that might be maybe small in the grander scheme of the stories that you're having. But I just want to get into the topic here, because, this is essentially the birthplace of really cutting your teeth in terms of being able to expand and being able to adapt to different markets whilst being consistent amongst them as well. So do you mind if we just go into a little bit more detail about that growth into Morningside, how that started, and just some of the adaptations you had to make in the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So why I say it was just out of the gate, I think that the brand awareness from people coming to Cape Town on vacation, doing the class, and then going, but there's nothing like this in Joburg. And we built on social media quite a strong presence with the cool factor of the Sweat 1000 in Cape Town and the community. And then we would do runs together. And it transcended from the studio into a lifestyle, which is what you really want, is a brand that becomes a lifestyle is a sure thing, you know. And that was something that I think the demand was there before. It was already, they were waiting for it. It was like, imagine when Krispy Kreme or Starbucks came to South Africa, or Burger King. Remember, it was an anomaly. I'm not comparing us to them, but
no, sure. South but there were queues on opening day.
Space, opening day, it was sold out. Opening weekend, it was sold out. So what we did is we did free classes for the first weekend for everybody, which obviously everyone loves free shit, you know. So it was already, if we had charged, we would have been fine. But we did this whole free weekend blowout so people could come experience it. There was such a buzz. And why I said earlier this Morningside Center was poorly designed, nothing worked in the space we were in, nothing. And when we negotiated so we could make it financially viable for us to do, we spoke to the landlords and said, everybody in the center we had found out was on rev share with the center. I said, so give us a break. 3 months in, look at what the general increase around our store is with the stores in your center, and then let's discuss a set rent, which we did. And everyone was flying because this essentially became a heartbeat for the center. It was so busy from 6 a.m. Every class was sold out all day, and everyone then went to the restaurants, to the stores, the Pick and Pay. Every store's business just started to fly because here comes all these people. They walk out of a class on the biggest high, the barber shop, the hair salons. I mean, I watched our clients in every single store. And that was a very smart move in negotiating and I used that in all my other businesses. I was like, we are going to generate feet in your center that you haven't had. We are basically going to be a heartbeat because you are turning over 60 people an hour. There's 60 going in, 60 going out, 60 waiting, coming early, going to shops. And that was a big selling point for us with landlords and for negotiating, which I learned, which helped me with all the places from then on. But then that center, so talking about the learning curve, when I was going to say about franchise and it was going to be a home run, because look what Morningside did, it doesn't work that way. We then went to Four Ways or one of those locations, and we opened, and the opening weekend, of course, was insane. And then it was like 5 people in a class, 7 people in a class, 4. So
sure, now this is a different suburb, in the same city.
Different suburb, same city. Like, what is different here? And how is this? And that's why I was saying franchising for me, because then the franchisee is always looking at the franchisor going, you're not helping me. What's going on? It's your fault. You know, so you're giving away 80% of your business and you're still doing 70% of the work to try and keep it going. I mean, we had to focus so hard on the 3 franchise stores that it actually diluted our energy in our local stores, which is another conversation altogether, but part of growth, which is, you know, what we're talking about. And how do you ensure that that same system, that same method, you've got the same treadmills, same setup, how come it's different? Pretoria was another completely different market for us. You know, we opened there, beautiful store in a great mall, and it just was, something wasn't working. It just wasn't the same. So how can this be so different? Yeah, I'd come to a store because I was like the creator and they'd sell it out because they'd market it and suddenly I was there, but it can't work based on one individual. You know, this has to be scalable without that guy's like Paul Mitchell hair salon. You want Paul Mitchell to cut your hair in the beginning, but then you'll have one of his people he's trained because they're in his method. So that was the key for us, is learning how to detract from Steve Uria teaching the class and how everybody can then do that, which has happened. Switch in Santa now is full all the time. I'm not there much at all because they finally got the method and they're delivering my message the way I wanted it delivered. And that's the hardest thing.
And that's the biggest thing, is because you can't have brand and culture are the same thing, just on different sides of the coin, really. And that's the problem, where it's like you can have the visual IP of the brand, in terms you can have the merch, you can have the logo, you can have all of that, but if you don't have the culture, I think that's one of the biggest challenges of a franchise model, is that if you've got this brand that you're franchising, you got to really think about how is it that you're going to make this culture consistent amongst this, because without that, again, you can be in these different markets, but it's around, like, I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges that you had, and I'm making this assumption, I really want to get into it, is the fact that because the culture was different in all of these different franchises.
That was different, and also remember, we're selling a service, not a product. And that's where you're different. You're in the service industry. There's a certain expectation of delivery. You know, a Starbucks or a McDonald's, there's the recipe. Is what it is. Anyone who's trained basically can cook that and create that off a little blueprint. But when you're selling energy and you're going into a class to teach and drive 60 people at 6 a.m, you got to bring it with everything you got, and you got to deliver my message the way I do. That's what I used to try and instill in my coaches. I said, if I see you here for a paycheck, I don't want you here. I want you here because you're passionate and you want to change your life. Your mission is my mission. We wake up with the same idea every day, and that's to do the work we're here for, and that's to make people feel brilliant. You know, I used to say it at my one-on-one gym, if you leave here and you don't feel better than when you came in, I'm not charging you for the workout. And honestly, I never refunded one person.
Now you're at the point where you're taking Superbalist ready to the races, and you're growing significantly. So tell me about this journey around how you got to R1 billion in turnover with the company, and what would you say are like some of the main, maybe one person can ask is like, what are like the main things that really facilitated that growth, or catalyzed that growth, or the better word. And then the other person can maybe say, like, well, these are all the mistakes along the way that we learned and had to figure out and pay the school fees for.
Cool. I mean, maybe I'll talk to growth. So first of all, it was asked of us. And I think if you look at the size of Takealot, and, you know, Takealot had its primary investor for the beginning was Tiger, a New York-based hedge fund in Facebook, you know, Flipkarts, massive businesses. And so for them, like, they're not interested in a business doing 1 million rand or 10 million rand. Like, the materiality matters. And they eventually sold to Naspers, and the same is true for them. So we were encouraged from the outset to think much, much, much bigger. So I mentioned when we produced our first budget, I couldn't tell you what it said or what our predictions were, but almost certainly Kim would have looked at it and said, it's nowhere near bold enough or big enough. Go bigger. You know, so if we thought, I don't know, 30% growth was big or 40% growth was big, he would say things like, come back and show me what 80 is going to cost. Which is amazing, because we were challenged to kind of think about what was possible, albeit in a very, very quantitative way. So if I want also you to double the business this year, yeah,
like that was the flavor of 2015 to 2020 market share. So I guess,
very true.
Just it was a privilege to be able to operate in that environment.
And so we had no idea, is the truth, but we went away and, like, I guess, got around a whiteboard and thought about what it would take. And so your question was, what did it take? I think, as I mentioned, the key ones are, you've got to grow traffic at the end of the day. You've got to grow customers coming out of that traffic, actually shopping. And then you've got to ship orders. And when you start with those two in between, it's like, how much inventory do we need to put on the thing in between? And so I at the time got better quickly at marketing and figuring out online marketing. And that's a privilege because most people in startups don't have a massive war chest. So I'd like, well, if I gave you 100 million in marketing, what would you do with it? You know, but that is kind of where we were at. So then you really, really think about that. And I probably would have, I'm pretty sure I told Kim in the beginning, like, I think we should do campus activations and influencers. And he definitely laughed me out of the room and was like, no, that's not we're not what we're doing. Sharpen pencils got better. But fundamentally, I think in the marketing stream, what we realized is that you don't buy revenue, you buy customers, and the customers gives you revenue. So you take the sum of your marketing and you divide it by the number of customers you're getting in your steady state. Like last year, we spent 10 million and we had so many first-time buyers that shopped the site. Okay, cool. So it was, 10 million, bought 10,000 customers. Now we've got a cost per customer. Then you slice that up per channel. So what was the cost from the customer coming from Facebook? What was the cost from the customer coming from email, from Google, and so on? Then you're like, oh, okay, cool. First time I'm looking at this, turns out that customer costs 2x what that customer costs. Okay, now I'm seeing the first pattern. I should invest more in channel A and less in channel B. So then you kind of, at the base case goes, so if I was to double my revenue, I have to double my customers. And if I was to double my customers, I would start with those channels that are giving me customers at the cheapest cost. But they don't grow to the sky. So you can only buy so much Facebook traffic at that customer acquisition cost before you get diminishing returns because, there's so much intent before your media funnel goes too wide. And you play with that and you play with that. And that I could talk through for hours, but that was like a huge change in my thinking is that you're not buying revenue, buying customers. Stop looking at revenue. And then downstream from that is you can grow your customer base two ways. At the head, which is the way I've talked about, acquire customers more efficiently. And at the tail, stop losing them. So retention. So then you do a similar exercise.
And then in the middle, increase basket size.
Correct. We had 1,000 customers. We lost half. Where did they go? Why did we lose them? Oh, it turns out if you cancel customers' orders, you lose N%. If you don't answer the phone, you lose N%. If you don't put in the box what they thought, you lose N%. So you start going, maybe stop doing that. So that's where the operational rigor comes through, is that good ops ultimately drives retention and fixes churn, which improves your CAC, which allows you to scale. And I think if you look at Takealot, it's a fairly vanilla marketer. If you look at how it's positioned in the market, it's not an award-winning marketer, but it's a 15 out of 10 operational business. And over time, I would have said Kalahari was a more interesting brand. Probably had funnier ads. Kalahari was probably more loved on a qualitative basis, but incomparable operational metrics. And that allowed the 5-year-old Takealot business to eclipse the 15-year-old Kalahari business. And so we learned from that, I guess, on the growth trajectory. Ops buys growth. Maybe I'll pause there because it's covered a bit of ops and it's covered a bit of customer growth. Claude can talk to where we screwed it up, which is all over the shop.
Please do.
Yeah. I mean, my answer is, I don't know, it's maybe a little bit boring, but I do not look back and think of like a handful of things that I regret, or I'm like, I wish we had been more data-led, or I wish we hadn't hired that person, or I wish we hadn't signed that brand, or I wish we had tried harder. There's really none of that. I think to Luke's point before he handed it over was like, we just kind of screwed it up all over the shop day to day, like struggles. But
like any good entrepreneur,
we gave it our all, and like it turned out pretty good. And I don't know, there was no like calamity, thank goodness. But that's not to say we got it perfect. So yeah, I guess it's the daily grind. It was, in hindsight, super tiring, like exhausting on a personal, emotional level. Like we didn't leave anything out there, and maybe that's why I have that answer. And I also have that answer because it ended well. I guess if it didn't end well, we would have probably pointed out what the turning point downwards was. It probably becomes a bit more easy in that case.
And that's it for this special edition of the Founder Files wrapping up 2024. Thank you so much for listening to another full episode. Thank you for being an awesome audience member, and thank you for being an awesome follower of the podcast. And if you're not already following the podcast, please make sure to like, subscribe, and engage with us. It is the best way to support the podcast. It's the best way to help us not only attract amazing guests, but attract the recognition that the podcast deserves, so we can get this amazing content out there. We can get these lessons out there so more people can find out about it. So not only is it the best way to support the podcast, but it's also the best way to make me happy, is to know that you are getting value from this and liking, commenting, sharing, but most importantly, following and subscribing. So thank you very much for tuning into another full episode. I'll see you soon. Cheers.